Thank you, Georg. So, good midday to everybody. I'm glad to be here. I had a déjà vu feeling when I came in here, and I realized I have been here before. And it was, in fact, 5 years ago, there was a Translingual Europe event here. It's nice to be back in the same place in a somewhat different situation. Back then, in 2008, it was a small, low-profile event. I think it was invitation-only event, and we had practically nothing. We had very little tools. We had the Euromatrix Plus project, and we had FlareNet. That's about it. I'm exaggerating, but it was modest beginnings back then. So it's actually nice to think that it was only 5 years ago, and now we are here after 160 million euros and 70 plus projects and all the results. I think it was a good achievement in 5 years. So that's my introduction to this theme, but I'm going to talk about the future. So I want to thank and give credit to those brave herders of cats, referring to Daniel Markus' presentation yesterday, this video. We wouldn't be in this situation without important projects, the horizontal projects like MetaNet, like LT Innovate, and like multilingual web, and without FlareNet, where it all started, of course. So my presentation will not be very logical. It will be fragments, because there's no time to paint a picture. I will skip all those generalities that you have seen in Marta's presentation already, so those strategic layers. Not all of them. Some of them I will repeat for a purpose. But I will concentrate now on the Horizon 2020 current status, the Connecting Europe facility, and there's a third item, also structural funds, that I will cover also for a particular reason. All the information that I show here is referring to Commission proposals or drafts, so nothing has been adopted, so take it with caution, and it's all in the hands of the lawmakers, whether this will happen or in which format it will happen, and how much, if it happens, how much budget is allocated to it. First, about Horizon 2020, just to repeat the general features about the program. So it's now a single program for research and innovation. We used to have two separate programs, the FP7 and the CIP program, CIP program, one for research, the other one for innovation. The idea is that in this program we try better and more closely to intertwine innovation with research. And actually even commercialization, intertwine commercialization, so to make full cycles, validation cycles. Market validation is a very important part of applicative research. There is still room for deep research, that is in its own peace and quiet. So that has not been forgotten. But it is supposed to be conducted mostly in the part excellent science. There is a pillar in Horizon 2020. I'm not going to talk about that because we are not involved in that pillar. But you may find, of course, funding opportunities there as well. We try more than ever to coordinate across program. So we have been told that we are managing silos and that we are only interested in our own territory, and that it's very difficult for projects and programs to act across horizontally on different themes like supercomputing, big data and language technologies at the same time. We tend to discourage people from trying to be too bold in their proposals because the proposal will not pass the evaluation. We try to change that. Maybe we will manage, but we'll see. We make a bigger effort than before. There's a new fast, flexible, open scheme for SMEs. I will just give one slide on that. Horizon 2020 is supposed to be more open, based on challenges rather than prescribing what do we expect you to do. So we describe the characteristics, the requirements, overall requirements, and the objectives, or the desired impact, to be more precise. And it's up to you, then the research and innovation community, to decide how that is done. I want to advertise the SME instrument. So this is something new, and we are not involved in that, so in the management of that instrument. But I just wanted to bring it to you as a funding opportunity, because there are many SMEs represented here that have given very good presentations. So don't forget this funding opportunity. It is likely to receive a generous budget because it is politically standing very high. But the thing is that it is totally open. So your proposal will be competing with biotechnology proposal or proposal on wind energy or health informatics. So be prepared to that. So it's a sort of FET open scheme in that sense, but it is for SMEs only. And it's supposed to be very easy and light scheme. It's meant for SMEs only, and it is even one SME can submit a proposal, so you don't even need a consortium. There are 3 separate phases. There's one quick feasibility study phase with a small lump sum and very little bureaucratics, and very short proposal, maybe 10 or 20 pages proposal. If you win that, you get that small lump sum and you have to prove your case. If you manage to prove your case, you proceed to the second stage. And that's more or less a usual innovation project. So project like the CEF project used to be, maybe between 1 and 2 million euro funding. And now maybe even with a consortium. And then the last phase is commercialization, bringing the idea to the market. And to this stage there are financial instruments, venture capital are being made available by different arrangements. Novel instruments like pre-commercial procurement. So that will not be grants, that will be this kind of more novel financing options. So one of the objectives here is to improve the entrepreneurial climate that is known to be not very stimulating in Europe for SMEs. Okay, now we go to the main topic that maybe people have been expecting me to tell about. How does the work program look like in Horizon 2020 for 14 and 15? So as I said, it's not adopted yet, of course, and for adoption and publication we probably have to wait until early or mid-December. So it's always like that. It comes at the last minute, and then calls are launched the day after or something like that. It's currently under discussion with the member states. It will go also to discussion within the Commission services in the inter-service consultation, so all the DGs can have say their idea, their opinion about this work program. And then it comes, these comments come back to us, and we think if we have to do something about those and modify the work program. Likely themes are big data, so twice, once for research, once for innovation, or innovation and research. Cracking the language barrier, multimodal and natural interaction. So maybe you would say not big surprises there. Why am I including big data here? So thanks to Wolfgang Wallster's presentation this morning, I don't really have to explain you why big data, why I'm presenting it to you. And it will hopefully become more obvious in a while. So this is a little bit of what Marta outlined already yesterday morning, of what is the rationale between the action on big data. Several studies show that there is a big hidden value in data, and since the data does not reach those who could make use of it, add value to it, it is not realized. The European data landscape is fragmented by this fact that we have many types of players. We have public sector, private sector, we have devices, sensor satellites producing data, cameras. It's such a complex ecosystem of data production that we don't even grasp it. The industry is composed of very few large companies and a high number of small SMEs. There are all kinds of barriers for the free use and movement and exploitation of data, language barriers, legal barriers, copyright, institutional obstacles. For one or the other reason, it cannot be done. And on the other hand, data users are practically all industry sectors. So it's a little bit like language technology. It's the potential users are all sectors. Everybody needs language. Everybody needs data. So we want to start to create we will not create it immediately, but we will make a big effort in the beginning to create European data ecosystem where data would flow free across borders without unnecessary obstacles. Of course, there are some obstacles that will remain, but at least those that are unnecessary, that we would even out those barriers. And that we would create an environment where data creates value. There is in every presentation and every conference about big data, there is some ambiguity of the definition of what is big data. And we take a rather pragmatic approach to this and saying that, okay, it's data which is too big to handle with traditional paradigms. It's data that is too big to store somewhere and then go afterwards and look at it and analyze it. It's data that is too big and too fast, that data flows are too fast for us to have the time to store it and look at it afterwards. But on the contrary, it needs to be analyzed in real time. As Wolfgang Wallster also made it clear in his presentation this morning, so that this real-time analysis is an important challenge of big data. So we are dealing with data streams rather than more and more than large databases, as it was the case before. One important aspect if we want to create the climate, the entrepreneurial climate or the ecosystem for where data can be used and can create value and can flow freely, we also need to build capacities that are not there. And we have detected clear skills gaps in big data. There are skills gaps in language technologies as well. That's another matter, but that is something very clear. And it's good to see that there are national programs, like there is this German national program, which is going to also tackle this skills gap by establishing these centers of excellence for big data. So skills, but also infrastructures need to be tackled. So it's very important that we do not ignore any significant part of this capacity building for big data. So it's good that Germany has already taken lead in this and is having a strong national program in helping to create these capacities, but we need to do this Europe-wide. Because only then we can come to a situation where the data flows actually freely across borders. And that's the challenge that we want to be able to address together with the member states, with their national programs. So how can we do that? So how can we improve capacities? How can we develop technology and address entire value chains, create value cross-sector, cross-border, cross-language, as Marta outlined yesterday. So we have, as I said, in Horizon to 2020, it's built this industrial leadership team where we are located. It's built on the idea of intertwined research and innovation. So that it's not the traditional model that first there is basic research, then there is applicative research, then there is innovation, and then we might go to the market. No, it takes too much time. And then we may have put our bets on in the wrong things in the beginning, and things change in the meanwhile. So we try to do smaller cycles, validation cycles. Now, that's why we intertwine innovation and research. And in the innovation side, we are going to put, I mean, this is what the Commission's line is, to put even more resources to the innovation side, because that is creating the ecosystem. That's all about creating the big data ecosystem. And promote the emergence of data markets, involve SMEs and encourage technology transfer, data exchange, reuse schemes. And very important for you is that, why I'm telling you this about big data, that analytics technologies is a central part of this. As Professor Wallster also demonstrated very well in his presentation, that analytics is all about language technology. So now our challenge will be deep analysis, so understanding the text and in real time for huge data volumes in multiple languages. So that's the challenge, and that's why that challenge is located in big data. It's not located under a title language technology, but it's for you. It's a challenge for you. That's I'm presenting it to. It's very important that you take ownership of this theme. So we have innovation actions for this capacity generation and this creating the right environment, stimulating environment. Then we have research action. Of course, this is still a research program. It is more, maybe with a more of an industrial perspective than before, but it's still, so we are going to dedicate resources on research on data structures, algorithms, architectures, language understanding technologies, and on how to handle data streams, and prediction, deep analysis of data in key industrial domains. So all this needs to be rooted to key industrial domains, because we have this intertwined research and innovation. But we have the challenge of being cross-sectoral also. So tackling big data challenges that affect several sectors at the same time. So now, what is there likely to be in the work program that will achieve all this? Well, we are only talking about the first 2 years of a 7-year program, so it's not the idea that all of this will be achieved in the first 2 years, of course, but it all needs to be initiated and kicked off in the first 2 years. That's very important. When I was here 5 years ago, we were in a situation where language technology had lost a bit ground, and we were already away into the 7th framework program, and we lost the first 3 calls, basically. So language technology actually started to be funded from the 4th call onwards. So from that, so that's why we had 5 years, not 7 years. In the research side, we will have the usual collaborative project. They are now called collaborative projects. We don't talk about STREPs or IPs anymore. So there will be collaborative projects addressing analysis, prediction, visualization of extremely large, diverse data sets. So diversity or variety, one of the 3 V's, is where the language variety comes in. So volume, yes, large amounts. Velocity, so very rapidly flowing data flows, but then this diversity or the variety is very important, that language variety is part of that. We would like to add the fourth V to this, which is value. So none of this matters if the data does not create value. So that's why we talk about data value chains. So we have collaborative projects then also to set for benchmarking and evaluation. It's very important to be able to measure your achievements. So that's why we have a separate thread of collaborative project for that. We are planning to set in motion something new, prizes, so challenges. We've seen that they have been creating good results, and they've been leveraging a lot of private investment also. So we are trying to experiment with prize schemes for the big challenges like deep analysis and prediction on big data. Then the innovation side of the work program. So we have planned an open data reuse incubator. Some of you may know that we tried to set up such an incubator already in a previous call called the SME DCA call. We didn't succeed, so we didn't have a successful proposal from that objective, but somebody said yesterday that funding agencies must be stubborn, and we try again. So we try again in Horizon 2020 in the first call to have a open data reuse incubator, a relatively large project that would spin off mini projects that can be very fast and very non-bureaucratic and can have a short duration, can be 6 or 12 months duration depending on the case. Proofs of concept of business models of how to make use of open data. And this is a special theme for this incubator, how to add value on open data. So data which is freely, openly available out there. So most often it's from governments. So it's government open data, but not necessarily. It can also be open data from the private sector. There's more and more of that. So the challenge is how to create added value on open data. Then there's a relatively large bulk of collaborative projects, and these projects will now then validate the technology in these cross-sectoral, cross-lingual, cross-border settings. And it's a bit like the CEF project. So this is in a similar way, if you want to make a parallel to the past. So what does this correspond to? Very importantly, in the innovation side, for creating the capacities, we have a number of horizontal actions. Cross-program coordination. So as I said in the beginning, we try to be much better than before in coordinating across the whole funding program what is going on and what are the other parts of the program doing on big data or analytics, and that we can couple it and we can learn from it and we can transfer the technology. We have an ambition to create a technology platform, or what is also called a public-private partnership, PPP. I will not go into details, but we have started. There's a lot of echo from that from the industry, and so we have also a preparatory action for a PPP preparation. Networks of skills centers. So this is about education, so capacity building of filling the knowledge and skills gap. So one horizontal action for networking skill centers, universities, and building curricula, training and education for big data professionals. Networking, clustering, legal issues, copyright issues, we have an action, horizontal action for that as well. So to address the barrier, institutional barriers. Then there's a theme. I jump to another theme because I don't have that much time. You ask already, where is the language technology? So language technology, we have something called cracking the language barrier. So after 5 years, we first thought we would crush all the barriers and level them. Now we are getting a bit more modest, and we say, maybe we just want to crack it. We want to crack the glass ceiling which is above the machine translation and which limits the quality generation, as we have seen in so many times. So the idea is, with a small action, we create a crack in that glass ceiling, then it will come down in shatters after a while. But we don't really have that much budgetary resources for this one, also because it's a very narrow theme. So you may say, I have seen all this. I have seen all these already in the work program for call 4 of FP7. Yes, but it just didn't take off back then. The time was not right for that. I think the time might be better right now. Let's remember that statistical machine translation, the concept for that was probably first mentioned in the 50s, but it was formalized early 80s in the IBM labs, 81 or 82. It took 20 years before the time was right for it to come to an application. So, and it took until 2007 until Google took it as their prime technology in their translation engine. But it proved to be very successful, and it's very old technology. So sometimes we have to be patient. So as I said, there is not much money in this part of the program. So we can afford to have one deep, broad research project with 100% funding. By the way, research projects in Horizon 2020 have 100% funding, and the innovation projects have 70% funding. So this is an improvement, because it used to be 75% for research and 50% for innovation in the previous program. So, so we can have one broad, deep and broad research, broad in the sense that it should be interdisciplinary and for real, this time for real. And focus on the points where current system fails, so breaking the glass ceiling. Then, since even in a small action, we want to intertwine research with innovation, we will have a few advanced pilots, because it's important to validate, to test the issues in the market. And there will be one coordination action that will look after everything, basically. So it will be looking after the herds. Okay, I have no time to go into detail. I take questions maybe afterwards if there's interest on the multimodal natural human-computer interaction. I just say that the rationale is that there is still, after all these years and all these smart devices and speech-enabled devices, there's a big gap between the human user and the machine. So the interface between the machine and the man is very poor, and we are most of our working life stress actually comes from that fact. It's not that we have too much work, it's because we cannot get it done with our computer in the time that we would otherwise get it done. So I have to speed up, because now in the remaining few minutes, I will just present quickly the Connecting Europe facility. A very different instrument, because this is not about research, this is not about innovation, this is about deployment. This is about building European digital service infrastructures and using mature, so more or less market-ready technologies to build and to power the future online digital services. So it's not a research or innovation program. Let's make that clear from the beginning. But again, since there are a lot of language service providers and language technology providers here, this is a very good opportunity, a funding opportunity for you. So that's why I'm taking up very quickly. In the current Commission legislative proposal, automated translation is mentioned as a so-called building block. So it means that it has a relatively high priority, and that building blocks are needed for all other digital services. So it has been acknowledged that language technology automated translation is needed for all other e-government services, for example, whether it's the e-justice platform or e-procurement, because it's understandable if I want to participate in a call for tender in Greece and all the tender documents are in Greek, how am I supposed to do that even if there is a perfect electronic exchange of documents if I don't understand the content? So that's why we have this component in the program. It will start by implementing the core platform, which will be mainly or exclusively by means of procurement. So there will be only calls for tender. So we issue a call for tender, and then the best one is selected, and then after the project, the contract, the end result becomes the ownership of the Commission. So we gain ownership of the result. So that's the difference to grants. The program also foresees grants for so-called generic services. That is likely to come a bit later, so I'm not going into that detail. We will start with the core platform and with calls for tender. So that's and CEF has a very strong national dimension because these digital services are for the citizens in the member states. So each member state, Germany, Lithuania, Greece, they have an interest that their citizens and their companies are served by these systems, and of course that the systems talks their languages. So they have an interest to help us make these digital services multilingual. So they have a stake in this automated translation building block. So these are some likely stakeholders, contributors, so future beneficiaries of the program, language industry at large, but especially language resource providers, language technology providers, and also language service providers. The language competence centers in the member states have a very important role to play, just because of this ownership that they need to take of their particular languages. Now we also want to mobilize member states and the regions. And now for the final thing, and this is where I would just want to pass a message to you arising from a very recent work that we have done inside the Commission to improve the access to structural funds. So improve the use of structural funds for technology development. Structural funds are huge. They are the second largest item on the EU budget after agriculture. It's 250 billion euro, something like that's the order of magnitude. And from that, as much as 15 billion euro has been invested in ICT projects in Europe. And so this is regional funding. It's also called regional funds. However, 19 billion would have been available, but only 15 billion euro could be used. So in regional funds, they are talking about something called absorption rates. Now we are talking about in our calls about oversubscription rates. They are talking about undersubscription rates, but they call it absorption rates. So the member states usually, it's a complicated, so it's impossible to say that somebody is responsible for this and that. It just happens that it is not possible to use all the funds that are made available in the structural funds. But the message is that we can change this. Now, it's a very long and rocky path, but we have started it, and we have seen very few, but some examples of language technology and language resource projects that have already been funded from structural funds. And the biggest example, to my knowledge, is the Lithuanian Language in the Information Society program, which has 10 million euro funding from the structural funds for machine translation, language resources, multilingual digital services for the Lithuanian language, and MT between Lithuanian and some other languages. And in Latvia, there is also a program addressing language resources for machine translation, so training machine translation systems. Now the question is, how can we make this happen in other member states? Okay, it's very easy to do. Well, it's not very easy, but it's easier to do in a small member states. For the simple fact that a small member state is a single region. Latvia, Lithuania, they are one single region in this regional policy. Poland is made up of 16 different regions. So we have to introduce language technology to these agendas of all these 16 regions if we want to cover everything. But of course, we may want to concentrate on the Masovian and the Silesian region if we think that our competence centers are there. And in those two regions, we can achieve something in language technology funding. But picture is extremely complicated. This comes from the nature that the purpose of structural funds is to subsidize the low-income regions or the less developed regions. But there are a lot of opportunities, and the opportunities we have now created, or JRC actually in Sevilla, the IPTS Institute have created a nice website called the Smart Specialization Platform. I cannot show it to you, but you take the URL and you try it yourself, s3platform.jrc.ec.europa.eu. I would have liked to show it to you because there is a section called Language Resources, and there's a section called Open Data that we have provided thanks to your help, the input that we have received from the community. We have 2 chapters in this, so smart specialization topics that are language resources and open data. And especially follow up the language resources section of that website. We hope to be able to develop this into a useful tool for the member states to develop, coordinate their structural fund or regional fund actions to promote some key technology areas that have a high impact and high interest for them. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kimmo, for this interesting presentation.